just didn't get on the other side of it. Those 2 plays get lost. It gets lost that you fought back from giving up a pump block for a touchdown to take a 2-score lead.
Yeah.
If that game had gone differently, we'd be sitting here saying, how about the intestinal fortitude of that team to be able to get itself up off the mat and find a way on the road in front of an opposing crowd and get the right? There's so many things that would have come out of that if you'd just gone if you get one stop there.
Yeah.
If you get one more first down. But you did not.
Well, that's the concern. If you had, then it's a defining game in your season.
Yes.
But you didn't. So it may become a defining game in your season.
Yeah.
Somebody texted, I don't remember if this was on Sportsline or where I saw this text from one of the listeners, but they talked about, and we've said this many times over the years, how the Maryland game was normally the defining barometer game of West Virginia's schedule because it landed in this time frame. They thought this Pitt game may be that. So that's what this group's going to have to do. Is it going to be able to fight back, put that loss behind it, and find a way in what is a very balanced top to bottom Big 12, find a way to rally and get this season back on track.
And Neil Brown said that in his press conference. He said there are going to be games like today. That's what you're going to have going forward. Mm-hmm. And the difference between winning and losing is going to be really, really close in most of these games, right?
Yeah.
So you got to find a way. You got to make plays. And so far, this team has not been able, this staff and this team has not been able to establish that they can make the key plays at the key moments to win the game.
Can't dot I's, can't cross T's.
Right.
That's right. And it sets up for Saturday. Not that we're going to look ahead too much here, but for Saturday, you talk about 2 wounded dogs coming into the field here. You got Kansas, who gets stunned by UNLV. They've got a quarterback, by the way. He'll run, right? He'll run. That could be problematic. So you're going to see a whole scenario, but that's for another day. Let's break down the numbers. What do the numbers say? Let's find out.
So I checked the numbers. We'll just go right to the numbers. Here comes a heater. Let's jump into the analytics portion of the show. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2.
Spreads on Stats brought to us by the Conley CPA Group. They provide value beyond numbers. What's that mean? Well, if you're in business, in need of an accountant, they can do all of that at any scale. They can do it remotely. They can come in and assist you. They provide tax planning and preparation, consulting, advising. If you got a little bit of an accounting staff, they can supplement it for you, outsource it. If you've got a CFO need, chief financial officer need, they can provide that as well. They're there for you. Conley's CPA Group. All right, so numbers in, glasses on, which means he's ready to go.
Ready to go.
I got a lot, so bear with me here.
Sure.
So we're going to do a couple different things. Some I've got just some raw numbers that'll make you shake your head that we'll get into in a second. But since we went into some specific keys to winning the game back on Thursday, let's look at how those areas came out. Hoppy, we talked a lot about games within the game on this one, and let's see how they did. First one we talked about, could West Virginia not only handle but exploit Pitt's pressure and aggressive defense against it? So the ability to block, hold them out, and then hit them for some big plays. You had seen Pitt give up a ton of big plays in their first 2 games. How did West Virginia do against that? Did pretty well offensively. We talked about the right side of West Virginia's line had to hold up against their left side pressure. Did for the most part. Nick Malone, highest graded offensive player as of this morning. Again, those numbers may change a little bit as they go in and review the film a couple more times, but Malone held up very well on that right side. The big play part of it, it's one of those just kind of like the game, like, yeah, you got some big plays, but did you get enough? I frankly thought there would be more. I thought, Hoppy, there would be a 60-yard or 2 pass past their defensive backs. I thought Garrett would whip off a 40-yard run for a touchdown. White on the edge. I thought there would be some opportunities for that. And there wasn't those massive big plays. You had 7 rushing plays of 10 yards or more, but only 1 that was longer than 15 yards. So those 10 yards or more runs described as explosive plays, but you didn't have the couple of really big ones I thought would be there. You had 5 passing plays of 15 yards or more, but only 2 of them came in the second half, 1 in the third quarter, 1 in the fourth quarter. Pitt did fall all the way to 79th nationally in opponent plays of 10 yards or more, so they dropped a full 10 spots. So you got a bunch of those. West Virginia moved up a spot to 24th nationally in plays of 10 yards or more. So the numbers tell you did that, but I thought there'd be more, quite frankly. I thought more of those would turn into big play touchdowns, and they did not. Second one, can you handle Pitt's tempo, turn it into a positive in your favor by getting some stops? Again, there were parts of the game where you did this extremely well. There were other parts where you did not, namely those last 2 drives and some early. You won the time of possession, guys, by 13 minutes. If I had told you that back on Thursday, I'd say that's a win. Pitt had the ball for only 3 minutes and 45 seconds in the third quarter.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
13 minutes. You did exactly what you wanted to do. You ran 16 more plays than Pitt did. That's the exact formula you wanted in this game, and yet you didn't end up with a win. Talked about, will your pass coverage be better? It needed to be. Can you get pressure on Holstein? This is another one of those. It's just exactly as the game played out. Yes and no. Yes and no, right? They ultimately beat you on some pass plays that cost you the game. But, man, you dominated that Pitt offensive line all night. That's as good as a West Virginia team has played up front in a long, long time. In fact, if you want a number to back up that statement, that's the most quarterback pressures. That's more quarterback pressures, 29 of them, than any game since the Virginia Tech game in 2021. That's how much you forced pressure up front. And we're going to go to the second part of that, which was I credit Eli Holstein. He was the best player on the field last night. He did an incredible job, even though he had 5 sacks and he had however many tackles for losses he had. I thought he did a really nice job of under pressure, getting out, and then throwing after absorbing the pressure or at the end taking off and running. We'll get to some of that. TJ Jackson, we talked about him last week. He was a dude up front. Had the most tackles for loss since David Long back in 2018. Jackson now has 27% of all of West Virginia's pressure on the year. He has played. He was there. He was in the backfield a lot last night. We thought it would come, a lot of pressure, Hop, against their right side.
Right.
Their right tackle had a 20-some grade on pass protection. It was right where you thought it would be. You got the pressure up front. It just wasn't enough to get the win. So there's some things from Thursday's preview show that just didn't end up going in your favor. Or they went in your favor, you just couldn't win it. Now here's some raw numbers. Some of these are just mind-boggling, guys. 34. That's the number of minutes West Virginia went without allowing an offensive point from Pitt, and yet you lost. They scored with just over 7 minutes to go in the second half. They did not score another offensive point until 3 minutes in the fourth quarter.
Jeez. And
you didn't win a game. If you had told me you took that offense and held it for 34 game minutes without an offensive point, how's that not turn into a win? That number to me, we could stop right now. I mean, we could just stop the number segment. That to me is mind-boggling. That happens with a defense that had been struggling and you don't end up with a win. You held them to 4 yards of offense for the first 27 minutes of the second half. 4 yards, guys. They had 152 yards in the final 3 minutes of the game. 4 to 152 at the end. Amazing. 67 scramble yards for Holstein on the final 2 drives. Pitt was 1 of 7 on third down, 0 of 1 on fourth, 1 of 8 on end of possession, and you didn't win the game.
Mm-hmm.
I told you 13 minutes, time of possession advance for West Virginia, plus 16 plays. Here's a number that surprised me. Ultimately, you ran it pretty well, nearly 200 yards rushing, right? You could have used another 5 or 6 to get that first down, Hop, that we talked about.
Yes.
89% of West Virginia's rushing yards were after contact.
CJ.
Pretty good job running through contact. Here's a mind-boggling number, and goes back to I thought Holstein played the best game of anybody on the field. 79% of Pitt's total rushing yards after contact were from Holstein, the quarterback. And that's one of those guys, that's a number, I say this a lot, that's a number that backs up what you saw. The number of times West Virginia had hands or a hand on Holstein and didn't put him on his back is staggering.
That's what leads to frustration. I think that's...
You got pressure, and you got to him with your hands on him, and he turned into Michael Vick at times, right? And just ran away from you to make plays. Incredible, including that spin out at the end when he took off. The other one, and again, give him credit, but West Virginia's just got to make some plays here. Holstein came into the game leading the country in turnover-worthy plays. He was giving people opportunities to get turnovers. You had two. You had one that we talked about down in the corner. I thought Fagan was right there, had the ball in his hands, and I think that goes for a pick six because Reed Carrico had just leveled Holstein. He was on his back. I'm not sure there was anybody in front of him to stop him. Didn't make the play. Anthony Wilson gets in front of the route, jumps the route. He saw the route coming, gets a hand on it, bats it. Not only was it not an interception, not only was it knocked down, it turns into a big gain for Pitt. So you had opportunities right there for some turnovers. You didn't get it. Instead, you were the one that turned it over. I know you had one late. It still counts on your record. You talked about next week's game. You're going to get two of the teams with the worst turnover margin in the country in Kansas and West Virginia. Only 4 teams are worse than those 2 teams. So of all the problems, that's another one that West Virginia's had. It has not been able to create any turnovers, and it keeps giving up too many. There's the bulk of the numbers.
Wow. You know, Brad, you during our coverage, you kept saying appropriately, I mean, because you're going by the analytics, like there has to be a turnover. There has to be an interception here. There has to be a turnover, right? And you just didn't get it. I mean, you had turnover opportunities, like you said. So analytically, you should have had 2 and didn't get any, right?
Correct. Or at the very least one, right? At the very least one. Because Wilson's probably should have just ended up knocked down. He didn't necessarily have his hands on it. He was there in great position and just bad play.
But even so, with a team that's behind and the kind of pressure the front was getting on the quarterback, that's usually, and you're dropping 7, that's usually the formula for a turnover.
I would think that's what the most maddening part is over in that building today is you dominate up front like you did and didn't have to bring a ton of exotic blitzes to do so. You just were beating them up front. You were better on your defensive line than they were on the offensive line, and you didn't get a win. That just, never mind all the other numbers you throw in. You do that should be a win. Kid was running for his life all night and just made some plays, got out of your tackles. Yeah. You did not do a good job once you got pressure of then getting him on the ground. That'll ultimately be defensively what the mark is against this. Mm-hmm. You got great pressure, just couldn't get the kid on the ground.
So you mentioned they had 6 plays that were 10 yards or more rushing, and Holstein owns 4 of those 6 plays. He had a 12-yard jaunt first quarter, and then fourth quarter, he went for 10, he went for 24, he went for 17. Inability to bring him down and to stop him led to that was the key to the victory.
You held Reed to 26 yards rushing. But your rushing defense was very good.
But where Reed burned you was on pass receptions. He got open, caught 4 or 5 passes, caught 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. He's their safety valve. So when pressure comes, that's where they go.
He did, but you held him to 76 yards. If you had told me that on Thursday, that he had 76 total yards, guy that leads the country in all-purpose yards, you would have said that's a win.
Mm-hmm.
You just would have won. You give up 4 total yards in the first 27 minutes of the half and lose the game? Gave up 152 in the final 2 drives? Those are mind-blowing numbers. That 34 minutes without an offensive point, you don't win the game. Staggering. That's it. That's all I got. I mean, I could give you a bunch of grades, but it doesn't much matter. Those are the numbers that mattered to the game right there.
You said Nick graded well.
Nick, highest graded offensive player.
Overall.
2nd week in a row, right? Yeah. Isn't it? 2nd week in a row?
Doing great. Wyatt Milam right in their top 4. Gallagher, Justin Robinson graded well. Yep. Defensively, TJ Jackson, Tyron Bradley. You know, the loss of Carrico hurt, right? He went out fairly early in that game, and he, again, was making plays early in that game. That's not ideal that he went out.
No.
That was probably happy. We didn't talk about that much on our broadcast. That was probably a bigger story than what we're making it out to be. You got the middle of that defense, and Holstein's chewing you up, running right down there. You could have used another one of your really good playmakers on the season, Reed Carrico, in there. So that probably cost you as well.
And Edward Vesterinen, first game they played without him, just, whatever. Not that he's going to run after quarterbacks and bring them down, but just from a depth perspective, you lose a guy that had played a lot of football. Spreads on Stats brought to us by the Conley CPA Group, getting ready for 40 years to celebrate. Experienced local professionals, outsourced accounting, and CFO services. They bring us Spreads on Stats. Let's do this real quick. Can we get that? All right, very good. Textual Healing is coming up and is brought to us in part by episode 800. And a reminder, 3 Guys brought to us by Tudor's Biscuit.